recorded presentation for the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission's Draft Amendment 4 to the Interstate Fishery Management Plan for Northern Shrimp. My name is Chelsea Toohey, and I am the Fishery Management Plan Coordinator for Northern Shrimp at the Commission. For this presentation, I'm going to start off with a brief overview of the Commission, followed by some background on Draft Amendment 4 and the proposed management options under consideration. The Commission was formed in 1942 as an interstate compact between the 15 Atlantic coast states from Maine through Florida. The Commission is a deliberative forum for the states coordinating management for species in state waters, which is 0 to 3 miles from shore. While each state is represented on the Commission by 3 commissioners, each state only gets 1 vote. The Commission's Northern Shrimp section includes the states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. So Amendment 4 to the Northern Shrimp Fishery Management Plan, or FMP, was initiated in December of 2023 after the 2023 data update for Northern Shrimp showed no improvement in stock status, with indices of abundance, biomass, and recruitment at time series lows, despite the stock being in a moratorium since 2014. At that point in time, the section had been grappling with how best to manage the species for some time. However, the setting of multi-year moratoriums is currently not allowed per the FMP requirements. The current regulations state that the section has the ability to set a closed season annually up to 366 days, and the only way to modify this provision is through an amendment to the FMP. The section was also interested in exploring the idea of management triggers, which would define a management response that's tied to definable metrics such as changing environmental or biologic indicators. Up on the screen here is a timeline for the development of Draft Amendment 4, and we are currently in the public comment period, which will extend through midnight on March 12th, 2025. Following the public comment period, the advisory panel will meet to review public comment and provide recommendations. Following that advisory panel meeting, the section will meet to review all of the public comment and select final measures for the amendment, which will occur in the spring of this year. Now, up on the screen are the 10 sections included in Draft Amendment 4, and the sections highlighted in bold represent the sections with the proposed management options and will be the sections reviewed in this presentation today. I'm now going to move into those options under consideration. I'm first going to list out all the options, and then I'll walk through each one in more detail. So Draft Amendment 4 considers 5 sets of options. 4 of them are on the screen here, and then the next slide will show the 5th one. The first proposed management change is a change to the objectives located in Section 2.3. The next 2 sets of options in Section 4.1.1 and Section 4.1.3 deal with extended moratoriums and closed seasons. And the fourth set of options relates to the addition of a management trigger to the FMP, and that's located in Section 4.1.13. The 5th and final set of options considers adding the specification setting timeline and management triggers to measures subject to change through adaptive management, meaning these items could potentially be altered through an addendum in the future rather than an amendment. And these options are listed in Section 4.5.2.2. Now moving into a more detailed overview of the options, the first proposed change to the Northern Shrimp Fishery Management Plan is to update the objectives of the plan. Specifically the first objective. So option A is the status quo option, and if selected, it would leave the objectives of the plan unchanged. Option B would modify the first objective, and so that first objective currently reads, protect and maintain the northern shrimp stock at a sustainable level that will support a viable fishery. Option B would replace the objective with manage the northern shrimp stock to allow for rebuilding, minimize fishery-related impacts, and maintain harvest opportunity, recognizing the influence of environmental conditions on stock productivity. Section 4.1.1, Fishery Specifications and Total Allowable Catch, considers 2 options. Option A is the status quo option, which represents the current management process of annual specifications. Option B considers an extended specifications process for closed seasons and includes 3 sub-options. When developing Draft Amendment 4, the PDT thought it would be appropriate to extend the specification setting timeline for moratorium years, but if there was a fishery, specification should occur annually. So the sub-options for option B include sub-option B1, which allows for 2-year moratoriums, Sub-option B2, which allows for 3-year moratoriums, and sub-option B3, which allows for 5-year moratoriums. These sub-options specify that this section would have the ability to set closed seasons or moratoriums longer than 1 year and would meet at least once during that moratorium. Specifications for moratorium years could only specify the fishing season or lack thereof and a research set-aside quota if desired. It should be noted that under these sub-options, while the section is only required to meet once during an extended moratorium, a member of the section may call a section meeting at any time if desired. Section 4.1.3 outlines options for the fishing season and is very similar to the options I just covered. So option A is the status quo option, where the maximum length of a closed season is 1 year or 366 days. And then option B outlines the extended closed seasons and includes 3 sub-options for 2-year, 3-year, and 5-year closed season maximums. Under none of these sub-options would the document allow for extended open seasons. It just allows for extended moratoriums. Section 4.1.13 of the document outlines the options for management triggers. So option A under this section represents the status quo option, where if selected, the management trigger section would be removed completely from Amendment 4 because management triggers are currently not used in the FMP. Option B outlines 2 sub-options for management triggers, and when taking final action on Amendment 4, the section would have the option to implement both triggers listed in the sub-options in option B or just one of the triggers. Per section requests back in September, option B also includes a provision for the incorporation of new data into management triggers. So sub-option B1 represents a recruitment trigger where 3 consecutive years of non-failed recruitment would trip the trigger. And non-failed recruitment is defined as a recruitment value above the 20th percentile of the reference period for both the Maine, New Hampshire and Northeast Fisheries Science Center surveys, where the strength of that year class persists through subsequent years. And if this trigger were to be tripped, it would prompt a full stock assessment update with projections to inform the potential for a fishery in future years. Under this sub-option, if a survey goes offline temporarily, if the survey is offline for 1 year, the trigger would be tripped if 5 out of 6 values are above the 20th percentile, meaning both surveys showed non-failed recruitment in 2 years and the remaining survey showed non-failed recruitment in the 3rd year. And if the survey goes offline for greater than 1 year, the trigger could be tripped if 4 out of 6 values are above the 20th percentile, meaning both surveys showed non-failed recruitment in 1 year and the remaining survey showed non-failed recruitment in the final 2 years of the evaluation period. If both surveys remain online and the trigger has not been tripped, but recruitment has been above the 20th percentile for 2 consecutive years, it could prompt the section to consider reopening the winter sampling program without the use of the size sorting grates. Through removing the size sorting grates, the technical committee could assess stage, length frequencies, and year class persistence of the northern shrimp stock before commencing a full stock assessment update. Sub-option B2 represents the temperature trigger option. So back in September, the section tasks the plan development team with developing an environmental-based trigger, and the plan development team's response to this tasking is the temperature trigger. So for this trigger to be tripped, 2 out of 3 years of a 3-year evaluation period must show winter surface temperatures and spring bottom temperatures below the 80th percentile of the reference period. And if this trigger were to be tripped, it would prompt the section to consider reopening the winter sampling program with the size sorting grates removed to capture that recruitment information. The plan development team thought that the temperature alone would not be enough to trigger a full assessment update, but it would be a good trigger for the winter sampling program if the program was not currently running. That way, the section and the technical committee could check in on the stock before commencing a full stock assessment update. It's important to note that with both of these trigger options, the section may open the winter sampling program at any time if desired, but the triggers serve to indicate when the program may provide information that can inform opening the fishery in the future. So if both triggers are selected for implementation, the following steps outline what would happen during the tripping of 1 or more triggers. If just the recruitment trigger is reached, then it would commence a full stock assessment update with projections. If just the temperature trigger is reached, the section would consider running the winter sampling program without the use of the size sorting grates. If neither trigger is reached, but recruitment is above the 20th percentile of the reference period for 2 consecutive years and both surveys remain online, the section would consider running the winter sampling program without those size sorting grades. If both triggers are reached, it would commence a full stock assessment update, and the section may choose to also run the winter sampling program with the size sorting grades removed if desired. Finally, option B under management triggers includes a provision for the incorporation of new data. So this would provide a way for new data such as industry-based research to be incorporated into management triggers in the future through section action without the need for a management document. Additionally, it would allow the trigger thresholds to be modified through section action if new information becomes available that would suggest that these thresholds may no longer be appropriate. If there was a desire to change anything else about the management triggers, such as the trigger response, it would require a management document. So if new information does become available to inform the triggers or the trigger thresholds, the section would task the technical committee to conduct an evaluation of that new data to modify the trigger. Following the technical committee's evaluation, the section could modify the data used in the management trigger or the trigger thresholds through section action. The final set of options under consideration are options in section 4.5.2.2, measures subject to change through adaptive management. So the list provided in the document and the list on the screen here outline the fishery management plan changes that can be accomplished through the addendum process. This list would also represent option A, which is the status quo option. And so this option does not include the specifications timeline or management triggers. Back in September, the section indicated that they would like the option to change the specification setting timeline in the future through an addendum rather than amendment to the fishery management plan. Option B under this set of options would add the specification setting timeline to measure subject to change through adaptive management and would add management triggers to that list. For the specification setting timeline, this includes the fishing season, which specifies the maximum length of a closed season. And for the addition of management triggers, this includes any aspect of a management trigger, such as a trigger response, that is not subject to change through section action through that new data provision. If the section ultimately chooses to not implement a management trigger, this would be removed from this option. And then finally, option B also slightly modifies an existing bullet under measure subject to change from any management measures included in Amendment 4 that are not subject to annual specification. And it would modify this language to any other management measures included in Amendment 4 to provide the section with more flexibility in the future to make changes to the plan through the addendum process rather than the amendment process. So that wraps up my overview of the options, and I'm now going to provide some information on how you can provide public comment on this action. The Commission has scheduled 4 public hearings for this action, which are listed up on the screen. All hearings will be held virtually with the exception of the hearing on Monday, February 24th, which will be held in person at the Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission in Maine. The draft amendment is posted on the ASMFC website on the Action Tracker page at www.asmfc.org. All of the public hearings are listed on the ASMFC meetings page. For more information on attending a public hearing or to register for the hearing webinar, please visit the links on this slide. Finally, you can submit written comments via email or mail. All of this information is listed on the ASMFC website and listed in the draft amendment itself. Written comments may be submitted to comments@asmfc.org with the subject line reading Northern Shrimp Draft Amendment 4. As a reminder, the public comment deadline for this action is 11:59 p.m. on March 12th, 2025.